Whispers in the void, the medical bay of Nexus 7 hummed with the soft pulse of monitoring equipment as Solana Reyes adjusted her translator interface. Through the observation window, she studied the twin figures seated motionless on the far side of the quarantine chamber, their bodies tall and slender with skin that caught the light like polished opal, fracturing it into prismatic patterns across the sterile walls. "They haven't spoken a word since they arrived 3 weeks ago," Dr. Weston said, scrolling through medical reports on his tablet. "Not in any language we recognize, anyway. The Council wants results, Reyes. You're our last hope before they transfer them to the Military Research Division." Solana nodded, her dark eyes never leaving the twins. "Have they been given names?" "Designation T1 and D2. We think they're female, or the equivalent. Recovered from a refugee vessel that escaped the destruction of the crystalline colonies in the Cygnus conflict." "They have names," Solana corrected gently. "We just don't know them yet." The security detail 2 officers in the gray uniforms of the United Stellar Alliance shifted uncomfortably behind her. The taller one, his name badge reading Hiro Tanaka, cleared his throat. "With respect, Dr. Reyes, these aren't just refugees. Intelligence believes they're bioweapons, engineered by the Crystalline Collective before their defeat. The other passengers on their vessel were terrified of them." Solana tucked a strand of her copper-brown hair behind her ear. "Fear does strange things to people, Officer Tanaka, especially during war." She gathered her equipment, a modified neural interface of her own design, built during her years studying nonverbal communication patterns among the sentient species of the Outer Rim. 6 years of fieldwork, 3 published papers on xenolinguistic, empathic theory, and still she felt unprepared for this encounter. "I'd like to go in alone," she said. Dr. Weston shook his head. "Absolutely not. Protocol requires." "Protocol won't help me establish trust," Solana interrupted. "If they are bioweapons, they've had ample opportunity to harm the medical staff. I need to demonstrate vulnerability to earn their confidence." Officer Tanaka stepped forward. "Director Pascal will never approve this." "Then don't tell her," Solana replied with a half-smile. "Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, especially when bureaucracy stands between frightened beings and safety." After 15 minutes of debate, a compromise was reached. Solana would enter alone, but Officer Tanaka and his partner would stand ready at the airlock, weapons set to stun. The quarantine chamber would be flooded with neutralizing gas at the first sign of aggression. As the airlock cycled open, Solana felt a curious pressure behind her eyes, a sensation she'd experienced only once before, while studying the telepathic coral entities of Europa. She stepped forward, leaving her translator on a small table by the entrance. This wasn't about words. Not yet. The twins, one with patterns of azure flowing through her opalescent skin, the other with veins of amber, watched her approach. They didn't move, but the ambient light in the room seemed to bend slightly around them, creating a subtle corona effect that the station scientists had yet to explain. Solana sat cross-legged on the floor, 3 meters away from them, close enough to show intention, far enough to respect their space. She placed her hands, palms up, on her knees, a gesture of openness recognized by most sentient species. "My name is Solana," she said softly, tapping her chest. "I'm here too. Listen." The pressure behind her eyes intensified, and for just a moment, she thought she heard something, not a voice, but a feeling. A resonance, like the sympathetic vibration of crystal glasses when the right note is struck. The twin with amber patterns tilted her head slightly, the first responsive movement anyone had witnessed. Behind the observation glass, Dr. Weston leaned forward, his breath fogging the barrier between worlds. The first contact had begun. Fractured light, the station's artificial day cycle had passed through 3 rotations since Solana's first encounter with the twins. She'd named them provisionally, and with their seeming approval Thora, the one with azure patterns, and Dia, with amber veins. The names had come to her during their second session, appearing in her mind like whispered suggestions rather than her own thoughts. Director Pascal's morning briefing had been tense, her thin lips pressed into a permanent line of disapproval as she reviewed Solana's progress reports. Telepathic potential remains unconfirmed, the director said, tapping her stylus against the conference table. Your feelings and impressions hardly constitute scientific evidence, Dr. Reyes. Solana maintained her composure despite the dismissal. The neural scans show synchronized theta wave patterns between myself and the twins when we're in proximity. That's not subjective, it's measurable data. Data that could indicate threat as easily as communication, Officer Tanaka interjected. He'd been assigned as her permanent security escort, his constant presence both reassuring and restrictive. The director's silver-streaked hair caught the light as she nodded. Precisely. The coalition ambassadors are demanding updates. Half the diplomatic corps believes these twins are victims. The other half is convinced they're dormant weapons waiting for activation. They're traumatized refugees, Solana countered, her voice quiet but firm. I've seen memories fragments of their world burning, crystalline structures shattering. They watched their entire civilization collapse. Dr. Weston leaned forward. If you're receiving coherent mental images, that represents a significant breakthrough. Not images exactly, Solana clarified. More like emotional imprints with sensory components. Their communication isn't linear like ours. It's multidimensional. Director Pascal stood, effectively ending the discussion. You have 5 more days, Dr. Reyes. Then I'm transferring them to the research facility on Ganymede. The military xenobiology division has better containment for potentially hazardous entities. Later, as Solana prepared for her 4th session, with the twins, Officer Tanaka lingered by the airlock. Something in his usually stoic expression had softened. My grandmother was at New Kyoto when the Cygnus attacks began, he said unexpectedly. She described crystalline beings moving through the colony, not attacking, just observing. Hours later, the defense systems failed. Some survivors claimed the crystalline observers somehow interfaced with our technology. Solana paused calibrating her neural interface. You think Thora and Dia were scouts? I think, he said carefully, that assuming they're harmless, because they appear vulnerable, could be a dangerous mistake. Not all weapons look threatening until they're activated. The quarantine chamber felt different today. The twins had arranged the sparse furnishings into a symmetrical pattern, small tables and cushions, forming a geometric shape that Solana recognized from her studies of crystalline architecture. Dia moved forward as Solana entered, her movements fluid and graceful. Unlike previous sessions, the amber-veined twin extended a slender hand, stopping just short of touching Solana's face. The pressure behind Solana's eyes intensified, then transformed into a cascade of sensations, the taste of starlight, the sound of crystal growing, the feeling of existing simultaneously across multiple planes of perception. Her neural interface recorded a spike in activity that briefly overloaded its circuits. You're trying to show me how you perceive reality, Solana whispered, blinking back tears from the intensity of the connection. Behind Dia, Thora remained, motionless, but the azure patterns across her skin pulsed in a rhythmic sequence. Solana realized the twins were working in concert, Dia establishing the connection, Thora regulating its intensity. Against protocol, Solana reached out and gently touched Dia's extended fingertips with her own. The contact lasted only seconds, but the neural feedback was immediate and overwhelming. She saw them, not as they appeared now, but as they had been, daughters of a crystalline philosopher, students of interspecies communication, their natural resonance abilities enhanced through educational immersion rather than military modification. They hadn't been weapons or scouts. They'd been the equivalent of linguistic diplomats, meant to bridge understanding between crystalline consciousness and carbon-based life. The station's alarm blared suddenly, shattering the connection. Officer Tanaka's voice came through the intercom. "Step back from the subjects immediately, Dr. Reyes." On the observation deck, Director Pascal had arrived with a contingent of security personnel. Her face was ash-white as she stared at the monitoring equipment. "What happened?" Solana demanded as she was escorted from the chamber. Her neural interface confiscated. Dr. Weston wouldn't meet her eyes. "Your brain activity. It began to synchronize with theirs. Your neural patterns were transforming. That's how they communicate." Solana insisted. "They're reshaping my perceptual framework to allow comprehension of their language." Director Pascal's voice was ice. "Or they're reprogramming your consciousness as a first step toward infiltration of our systems. Either way, your direct contact privileges are revoked pending review." As security led her away, Solana glanced back. Through the quarantine glass, Dia stood watching, one hand pressed against the barrier. For the first time, a sound emerged. From the crystalline being, not through air vibration, but directly into Solana's mind. A single word, fragile as a whisper: friend. Resonance. The residential quarters on level 7 of Nexus Station felt more like a prison cell to Solana than a home. 3 days had passed since her contact with the twins had been restricted, and the neural dampening field they'd installed in her quarters gave her persistent migraines. The official explanation was precautionary monitoring. Unofficially, they were treating her as if she'd been contaminated. A gentle chime announced a visitor. When the door slid open, Officer Tanaka stood in the corridor, his usually immaculate uniform slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd been working extended shifts. "Officer," she acknowledged coolly. "Come to check if I've grown crystal appendages yet." He winced at her tone, but stepped inside, the door sealing behind him. "The Security Council has voted," he said without preamble. "Transport arrives tomorrow to relocate the twins to the Ganymede facility." Something cold settled in Solana's stomach. "That's a military black site. They'll be treated as specimens, not people." "I know." Tanaka's voice was uncharacteristically quiet. "That's why I'm here." He removed a small device from his pocket and activated it. A subtle hum filled the room, a localized signal disruptor. Whatever they said now wouldn't be monitored. "I've reviewed your neural scans from the last session," he continued, "and I've compared them with historical records from first contact scenarios." Solana studied his face, trying to understand his intent. And I think you're right. The patterns don't match known infiltration techniques. They're consistent with," he hesitated, "deep empathic bonding. Like what happened with the Epsilon translators." The Epsilon incident was well known in xenolinguistic circles. Human translators who had formed such profound neural connections with the aquatic Epsilon species that they had temporarily adopted aspects of Epsilon perception and cognition. The scientific community had eventually accepted it as a breakthrough in cross-species communication rather than a security threat. "Why are you telling me this?" Solana asked. Tanaka looked down at his hands. "My grandmother didn't just survive the Cygnus attacks. She was saved by a crystalline being who shielded her during the colony's destruction. Military records classified her account as trauma-induced hallucination, but she maintained until her death that not all the crystalline entities were hostile." He met Solana's eyes. "I requested the security assignment to your project because I wanted to know the truth. I think you've found it, and I think we're making a terrible mistake." The conversation shifted to hushed planning. Tanaka couldn't openly defy orders, but he could create a window of opportunity, a 20-minute gap in the security rotation during shift change. It would be enough time for Solana to have one final unmonitored session with the twins. If I'm wrong about them, Solana said as Tanaka prepared to leave, you'll lose everything, your career, possibly your freedom. He paused at the door. And if we're right, but do nothing, I lose something far more important. The medical bay was dimly lit during the night cycle, staffed only by a junior technician, who Tanaka had conveniently reassigned to inventory duty in the lower levels. Using his security clearance, he deactivated the quarantine chamber's external monitoring systems. 19 minutes, he reminded Solana, handing her a modified neural interface, this one designed to record rather than dampen the connection. Make them count. Inside the chamber, the twins had been separated, Thora sedated on a medical bed, preparation for tomorrow's transport. Dia stood alone by the observation window, her amber veins pulsing with an agitated rhythm. Dia, Solana called softly, the crystalline being turned, and the emotional wave that hit Solana nearly brought her to her knees. Fear, desperation, and beneath it, a profound recognition. Friend Solana, Sister Thora sleeps, not sleeps. They come to take. They come to break. The words formed in Solana's mind with increasing clarity, accompanied by fragmented images of a sterile laboratory, of crystalline structures being systematically shattered for analysis. I won't let them take. You, Solana promised, moving closer. But I need to understand. I need to know what you are, why you were on that refugee ship. Dia's fingers extended, hovering centimeters from Solana's temple. A question hung in the air between them. Solana nodded, removing the neural dampeners that had been implanted behind her ears. Show me everything. The connection bloomed between them, not the overwhelming cascade of their previous encounter, but a controlled stream of memory and meaning. Solana saw the crystalline world of Cygnus Prime not as a military power, but as a collective consciousness, a civilization of resonant beings who experienced existence as harmonic patterns rather than discrete identities. The twins had been communication specialists, their natural resonance abilities refined to interpret the dissonant thought patterns of non-crystalline species. When the war came a tragic misunderstanding, escalated by fear, they had been aboard a cultural exchange vessel, trapped between worlds belonging nowhere. We speak differently now, Dia explained. War damage changed our resonance. Others, of our kind, fear our new frequencies. Humans fear what they cannot hear, understand. The deepest revelation came last. The twins hadn't been weapons, but they had been changed by proximity to human consciousness. Their prolonged exposure to human thought patterns had created a hybrid form of awareness, neither fully crystalline nor human, but something unprecedented. And Dia, in particular, had formed an attachment to Solana that transcended mere communication. There was something like longing in the connection between them, a resonance that hummed with possibilities beyond translator and subject. Dr. Reyes. Tanaka's urgent voice came through the intercom. 2 minutes. Director Pascal is making an unscheduled inspection round. Solana held Dia's gaze. Do you trust me? The answer came not in words, but in a pulse of certainty that warmed Solana's chest. Then we need a new plan, she whispered, glancing at the still sedated Thora. And we need it now. As she rushed toward the exit, the last image Dia shared followed her crystalline hands intertwined with human ones, resonating at a frequency that created not discord, but harmony. The breaking storm red. Emergency lights pulsed through the corridors of Nexus 7 as the station's warning system blared its automated message. Attention all personnel. Gravitational anomaly detected in Sector 4. Initiating emergency protocols. Proceed to designated evacuation points. Director Pascal strode into the command center, her silver-streaked hair pulled tight in a functional bun. Status report, she demanded. The chief engineer looked up from his console, face pale. Some kind of localized space-time distortion. It's affecting our power grid and communications array. We've lost contact with 3 decks already. Cause? Unknown, Director. The anomaly appeared 20 minutes ago, centered near— He hesitated, near the medical quarantine sector. Pascal's eyes narrowed. The twins. We can't confirm that, the engineer replied. But the pattern resembles crystalline resonance technology from the Cygnus conflict. Initiate containment protocol Sigma, Pascal ordered. I want those specimens secured for immediate evacuation on the military transport. Priority over all other. The doors to the command center slid open, admitting Officer Tanaka and Solana. The security officer's uniform was disheveled, a thin cut bleeding along his temple. Director, Tanaka interrupted, the anomaly isn't an attack. It's a distress response. Pascal's hand moved toward the security alert panel. Dr. Reyes, you are in violation of direct orders. Officer Tanaka, place her under arrest immediately. With? Respect, Director. You need to listen, Solana insisted. The sedatives you administered to Thora have created a psychic feedback loop between the twins. Their resonance abilities are destabilizing as a defensive mechanism. Destabilizing? The chief engineer looked up sharply. The anomaly's radius has expanded by 30% in the last 5 minutes. At this rate, it'll reach the reactor core in less than an hour. Solana stepped forward. I can stop it, but I need authorization to bring Dia to her sister. There. Connection needs to be stabilized. Absolutely not, Pascal snapped. This only confirms they're the weapons we suspected. We evacuate essential personnel and leave the station. The Coalition will send a containment team. A junior officer spoke up from her monitoring station. Director, evacuation routes to docking. Bays 3 through 7 are compromised. The anomaly is spreading faster than predicted. Alarms intensified as the station's gravity fluctuated, sending loose equipment floating momentarily before crashing back down. The lights flickered, backup systems engaging with a low hum. How many personnel are still in the affected sectors? Pascal demanded. 43 civilians and 17 staff members, came the reply. Medical is reporting the sedatives are failing on the crystalline subject. Her vital signs are becoming erratic. Solana caught Tanaka's eye. A silent communication passed between them. They were running out of time. Director, Solana said, her voice calm despite the chaos. I've established a neural link with Dia. I understand their communication now. They're not weapons. They're translators whose abilities were enhanced to bridge understanding between species. The resonance distortion is a panic response, not an attack. Pascal hesitated, the weight of command heavy in her expression. And if you're wrong? Then we lose the station either way, Tanaka interjected. But Dr. Reyes has a chance to stop this. After an agonizing moment, Pascal nodded. You have 15 minutes. Officer Tanaka, escort Dr. Reyes and the conscious twin to medical. If there's any sign of deliberate sabotage, you are authorized to use lethal force. The journey to medical was harrowing. Sections of the station were experiencing localized reality distortions. Time flowing at different rates, matter phasing. In and out of normal space. They passed a maintenance worker, frozen mid-stride, caught in a temporal pocket, and a room where water from a broken pipe hung in globules that shimmered with prismatic light. Dia moved with increasing urgency. Her amber patterns pulsing with an intensity that made the air around her vibrate. When they reached the medical bay, they found chaos equipment floating untethered. Medical staff huddled behind a makeshift barrier of overturned beds. Thora lay on an examination table at the center of the disturbance, her azure patterns flashing. Erratically. Around her, reality itself seemed to bend and warp, the laws of physics rewritten by her unconscious. Distress.sister-pain, sister fear, breaking pattern, cannot hold, Dia's thoughts crashed into Solana's mind with desperate intensity. "What do you need to do?" Solana asked, steadying herself against a wall, as another gravity fluctuation rippled through the room. "Join, mend, harmonize, need human bridge. Dangerous for you." Solana understood immediately. "You need me to help stabilize the connection between you. I'll be the conduit." Tanaka grabbed her arm. "That could kill you. The human brain isn't designed to channel crystalline resonance." "If we do nothing, everyone on this station dies," Solana replied. She removed the neural interface from her temple. "No technology. Direct connection only." With Tanaka's reluctant help, they navigated the distortion field surrounding Thora. Each step closer felt like moving through viscous liquid, time stretching and compressing unpredictably. When they reached the table, Dia positioned herself at her sister's head. She extended one crystalline hand to Thora's temple and the other toward Solana. "Whatever happens," Solana told Tanaka, "don't break the connection until it's stabilized." She clasped Dia's outstretched hand. The universe exploded behind Solana's eyes, not in pain, but in expansion. Her consciousness stretched across dimensions she'd never perceived before, awareness extending beyond the limitations of human senses. She became a conduit for the twins' harmonization, their crystalline consciousness flowing through her human mind like light through a prism. Through the connection, she understood at last the true nature of the twins' abilities. They weren't merely telepathic. They existed partially in a quantum state, their consciousness entangled across multiple planes of reality. The military scientists who'd studied captured crystalline beings had fundamentally misunderstood. What they'd seen as weapons technology was actually a form of existence so alien it defied conventional categorization. In the command center, Director Pascal watched in astonishment as the anomaly readings began to stabilize, the distortion field contracting rather than expanding. "They're actually doing it," the chief engineer murmured. In medical bay, Solana stood locked in a triangular connection with the twins, her body rigid, eyes open, but seeing beyond the physical realm. Crystalline patterns briefly appeared beneath her skin, following her veins before fading again. The distortions around them gradually subsided. Equipment settled gently to the floor as gravity normalized. The temporal pockets throughout the station collapsed, releasing those caught within them. Thora's eyes opened faceted like gemstones, yet unmistakably aware. The azure patterns across her skin stabilized into a steady, gentle pulse that matched her sister's amber rhythm. As the resonance between the three of them reached perfect harmony, a wave of energy rippled outward, restoring rather than disrupting. Systems throughout the station reset, power levels returned to normal, and the emergency alarms fell silent. Solana's knees buckled as the connection gently disengaged. Tanaka caught her before she hit the floor, easing her onto a nearby chair. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded slowly, her perception gradually returning to normal human parameters. "I saw everything, what they are, what they can do." She looked up at the twins, who stood side by side, their posture now relaxed and synchronized. "And what we nearly destroyed out of fear." Over the intercom, Director Pascal's voice sounded both relieved and cautious. "Medical bay, report status." Tanaka answered, "Situation contained, Director. The station is secure." He looked at Solana and the twins, adding, "And I believe we've established first true contact." Through their lingering connection, Solana felt Dia's response, not words, but a complex emotion that translated roughly to hope after darkness. For the first time since arriving on Nexus 7, the crystalline twins were not seen as weapons to be feared, but as beings to be understood. Beyond the echo 2 months after the incident that nearly destroyed Nexus 7, the station had transformed. Where once sterile corridors had separated species by security classifications, now there were integration zones with modified environmental parameters to accommodate diverse physiologies. The former quarantine chamber had been repurposed as a resonance communication center, with Thora and Dia serving as its first official ambassadors. Solana stood by the observation window of the newly established diplomatic wing, watching the crystalline twins work with a group of coalition representatives. Since the crisis, her neural pathways had retained traces of crystalline resonance, not enough to communicate as the twins did, but sufficient to serve as an interpreter between worlds. The Centauri delegation arrives tomorrow. Officer Tanaka, now chief of interspecies security, said as he joined her. They're bringing their own resonance specialists to study the twins' techniques. Solana nodded. Director Pascal, still uncomfortable. With the arrangement? She's adapting, Tanaka replied with a small smile. Having the coalition upgrade our research facilities in exchange for limited access to the RCC has softened her position considerably. Through the window, they watched as Dia demonstrated resonance principles to the fascinated diplomats. Vain. Amber patterns beneath her crystalline skin had grown more complex over the weeks, reflecting her expanding vocabulary of emotional conceptual translations. The medical team says your neural scans are stabilizing, Tanaka mentioned, his tone carefully neutral. Less integration with crystalline patterns. They're concerned I've been changed too fundamentally, Solana acknowledged. At my connection with Dia has altered my human perception permanently. Has it? She considered the question. The resonance bond between herself and Dia had evolved beyond translator and subject into something unprecedented, a bridge between fundamentally different modes of existence. Their connection transcended professional boundaries, growing into something both had come to cherish. I've been changed, she admitted, but so have they. So has this station. Perhaps that's the point. On the other side of the glass, Dia turned as if sensing their conversation. Her gaze met Solana's, and a familiar warmth bloomed in Solana's. Mind not intrusive, but invited. Friend more than friend, came the gentle thought. New patterns forming. Beautiful harmony. Tanaka observed the silent exchange with understanding. The coalition is calling this the most significant breakthrough in interspecies relations since the Epsilon translations. They're already discussing establishing similar communication centers on other frontier stations. It's a start, Solana said. Fear nearly destroyed both our peoples. Understanding might save us. Later that evening, as Nexus 7's artificial day cycle dimmed to simulate night, Solana met Dia in the station's newly installed arboretum. The crystalline being's form caught the starlight streaming through the transparent dome, refracting it into delicate patterns across the vegetation. The coalition has approved your proposal, Solana said, sitting beside Dia on a bench overlooking a small pond. They'll send a research vessel to the remnants of the crystalline colonies, with you and Thora as cultural liaisons. Home that was, Dia's thoughts rippled with complex emotions. Will you join our journey? The question carried layers of meaning that transcended its simple form, an invitation not just to a mission, but to continue exploring the unique bond they shared. A bond that defied classification under either human or crystalline understanding. Yes, Solana answered simply, her hand moving to rest beside Dia's crystalline one on the bench between them. Not quite touching, but close enough that the resonance hummed between them. A promise of connection that bridged the space between stars. In the pond before them, the reflected stars shimmered as a gentle breeze disturbed the water's surface. For a moment, the boundaries between worlds, like those between individuals, seemed wonderfully, hopefully permeable.